Two of the most powerful men in the world are quietly waging a war over your money. One wants to slash interest rates and weaken the dollar to boost exports. The other is resisting and defending the image of a stable, apolitical central bank that doesn't cave to presidents. This isn't just an economic disagreement. It's a fracture inside the US financial machine. In a world where money is increasingly captured, Bitcoin might not just be an alternative. It might be the answer. Let's mine deep. When Trump publicly called Jerome Powell too slow during a recent press conference, it wasn't just a casual critique.
I don't think he's doing the job. He's too late, always too late, a little slow, and I'm not happy with him.
It was a not-so-subtle warning. A proverbial sword of Damocles now hangs above Powell's head. A constant reminder that the man who appointed him now wants him out. Trump handpicked Powell for the job back in 2018. And now he says Powell's exit can't come soon enough. But Powell isn't folding. He's even pushing back and blaming Trump's own tariffs for the recent market volatility.
The level of tariff increases announced so far is significantly larger than anticipated, and the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. Our obligation is to keep longer-term inflation expectations well anchored, and to make certain that a one-time increase in the price level does not become an ongoing inflation problem.
Translation: Powell sees tariffs as an inflation accelerator, and cutting rates to Trump's liking would undermine the Fed's credibility. Other economists warn the opposite could happen, that tariffs might actually choke consumer demand, triggering deflation by weakening purchasing power. So, who's in control? That's the deeper issue here. Not whether Powell will pivot, but whether the structure of the Fed can withstand being pulled in opposite directions by political and economic forces that don't align. And while all eyes are still on the Fed, some investors are looking elsewhere, not out of fear, but because the rules of the game are starting to feel rigged, or worse, random. Bitcoin doesn't try to manage expectations. It doesn't need consensus depending on who's in office or what the inflation print says. There's no equivalent of Powell in Bitcoin. No rotating chairs, no shifting timelines, no sword of Damocles. For years, Bitcoin was treated as a speculative asset. But lately, it started behaving more like what it was built to be, a counterweight. Something that doesn't require belief, just verification. So why should you care? Because the faith in the US dollar isn't just built on liquidity or convenience. It's built on trust that the people controlling it operate independently, neutrally, and free from political interference. Jerome Powell's predecessor, Alan Greenspan, puts it bluntly himself.
First of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
Translation: the people who control the money supply don't answer to voters or presidents. We don't understand half of the stuff that goes inside this building. And more investors are deciding, I'm done waiting to find out. That's why BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF, IBIT, just became the fastest growing ETF launch in history. That's why investment funds like SoftBank are funneling hundreds of millions into a Bitcoin treasury company. That's why countries like Qatar and UAE are investing in mining infrastructure. Not just buying Bitcoin, they're earning it. So no, the dollar isn't dead. But faith in it, that's already moving. And it's moving to the one thing nobody can print, pause, or pivot. Got Bitcoin? If you're stuck spending dollars, at least stop earning fiat rewards. Use Fold and earn Bitcoin on everyday spending. Groceries, travel, even paying bills. And take advantage of Bitcoin rewards with merchants you might already shop with. It's the easiest way to stack sats. So, If you're in the United States and you don't have Fold yet, what are you doing? Buy, earn, and save in Bitcoin, all in one app. Fold is the ultimate toolkit for making Bitcoin savings a daily habit. Now we go backstage with Rizzo, the Bitcoin historian at the Bitcoin conference. Did you see the price coming? You've been studying Bitcoin for so long. That's why you're known as a Bitcoin historian.
Right.
Let's be honest. They say history repeats itself. Did you know it was coming?
Well, we have some strong bulls out there. Hal Finney, the biggest, predicting $10 million Bitcoin within the first couple days of Bitcoin being out. You can't beat that from 2009. Look, I like to maintain a positive outlook on Bitcoin. We all think it's going to become global money. How much does that have to be worth? There has to be more users. Bitcoin, I think at one point will be insanely valuable. You'll laugh about how you lost Bitcoins doing stupid things. That's the nature of Bitcoin. I just was talking with someone at the conference who used to trade hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins for pennies. And he's just here, an anonymous guy walking around, wouldn't know him. And that's the nature, right? We're making the global money. The financial system is changing out from under us. And it's going to be a heck of a story, I think.
What do you think is the most underappreciated aspect of Bitcoin's history?
Yeah, I think most people just don't know that Bitcoin was once worth nothing and that it's through the efforts of people that Bitcoin became worth money, right? So I think people just think of Bitcoin like a stock or a bond or anything else that has value. And a lot of people, they have problems with value, right? I come from a society or part of America where, wealthy people are kind of looked at like skeptically, right? We kind of think wealthy people must be ripping people off. There's that CEO was just murdered. We kind of look at these big companies as saying like, oh, maybe big companies, they must be scamming us in some way, right? So I don't know. I've always had a distrust of wealth, and like my journey in Bitcoin has been one where I've had to struggle and unlearn that a bit. Because I do think like Bitcoin, just because it's really valuable, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad. Or it doesn't mean that's necessarily good, but obviously we know that Bitcoin has a lot of positive effects. So,
do you think the lessons have been learned from the block wars, or do you imagine another continuous fork over block size could rise again?
You're just bringing all the classic questions here. These are the questions that the OGs still talk about, right? I think all the old-time Bitcoiners, we want to believe that we'll be able to relive the old wars, right? Our struggles, like, were worth it. Were there Block Wars 1 and there will be a Block Wars 2? It's the same way that everyone now is always, oh, it's going to be World War 3, it's World War 3, right? So cultures, I think, are just kind of, they can become ingrained with wanting to kind of repeat the past. I think we might be moving out of that, at least the technical aspect of Bitcoin. I think we're now in a political fight for Bitcoin, right? And that's the really thing with the fight for Bitcoin is still ongoing, but it's moved from the technical sphere so maybe this is Block Wars 2, but we're, with the Trump administration and the global powers and the United Arab Emirates who are here, like maybe this is what it looks like. It's, they say history rhymes, it doesn't repeat.
I do want to go deeper on the block size wars because you have a really good way of honestly like breaking down what happened in that fork, and because it was like between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash.
Right, yeah. Well, look, the nature of Bitcoin is that anybody at any time can fork the code base. You can take it tomorrow and clone it and call it Isabella coin, and you can go and promote that as Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is an open source technology. There's no rules. So within Bitcoin, there was like a deep divide about how the technology should work and how it should be coded and how people should use it for adoption. That manifested kind of in this period where there was two big warring camps and they had different visions for Bitcoin. One of those visions is like becoming very mainstream and, being embraced by politicians. And one of them is still in the market. You can buy Bitcoin Cash. You can buy, I can't even remember the other ones, Bitcoin Gold and, all those sort of forks. I wouldn't recommend it. Because Bitcoin is the one that's winning in the market. But yeah, I think there was a fascinating period where people were really questioning, whether they can change Bitcoin and whether, it could function as a technology in different conditions. I think we're moving out of that. I think people don't want to be left behind, right? $100,000 Bitcoin is different than a $1,000 Bitcoin,